Since my most recent review on the hidden symbolism behind the chart-topping West Coast anthem Squabble Up by Kendrick Lamar, I have found myself in a sudden state of infatuation with not just the production on his most recent album release, GNX, but also his stylistic and often belligerent vocal performances. He perfectly balances maintaining an energetic delivery whilst providing his listeners with a constant onslaught of prolific sentiments amongst verses riddled with nothing but the most blood-curdling disses over beats that most would presume are more suitable for the newer age of budding West Coast rappers that have been emerging out of the California music scene. After his infamous lyrical victory over fellow rappers Drake and J. Cole earlier this year in May, both myself and a majority of the listening audience were under the assumption that since he had just previously unleashed a barrage of fiery exposés in relation to the slander of Drake's character and musical prowess, Lamar, who's normally known for dropping periodically over the course of many years, would presumably return to his musical hibernation and join us again for the release of an officially sanctioned body of work after an extended hiatus. The boogeyman, Mr. Lamar, released a promotional teaser trailer on November 22nd where we can see a dimly lit video and over a grim cobblestone floor, leading up to the entrance of a spacious room of sorts where Kendrick is seen leaving one of two vehicles parked perpendicularly. Before I begin to deduce the subliminal meanings behind the abrasive lyrics of this introductory track, it is important that we take a second to understand the significance of both vehicles in the shot of the cavernous hallway. The car that Lamar is seen exiting in the beginning of the scene is a nod to the cult classic 1987 Buick Grand National Experimental, or GNX for short, which stands as a bold and physical reference to the album, which is titled after this exact model. After leaving the coupe, the scene zooms out to help expound on the presence of the second vehicle, positioned on the left-hand side. This car, at first glance, looks almost like an exact replica of the GNX that Lamar is seen in. However, after further observation and keen insight, one realizes that this model is actually the base trim version of Kendrick's modified GNX coupe. At the time, the Grand National Experimental was created alongside two other marketable variants, the 1987 Buick Regal and the 87 Grand National. Both almost identical cars, but in comparison to the GNX, they lacked a sporty surplus of horsepower and an increased turbo power system that made the GNX a novelty for ages to come. Most fans have drawn comparison to Kendrick's many allusions to a presumed second album, especially in his latest video Squabble Up, which I took the liberty of analyzing recently. Oftentimes, he would display symbols that would force the audience to theorize that this may not be a standalone LP. And now understanding that these two vehicles have distinct features, one can be led towards the suggestion that the GNX variant of this 1987 Buick is supposed to represent his more modern and new age approach on his most recent album.
Pickable surprise, bitch, it's that nigga chicken cheese. Pickable. Let me FaceTime my op, bitch, I'm up the street. Pickable. Yeah.
Whilst also simultaneously granting him a chance to pay homage to the legacy of hip-hop artists who stem from the West Coast. The Grand National, or the more traditional version of the 87 Buick, can then be looked at as the mysterious unreleased second album that fans and critics alike have been anticipating, especially since we see the vehicle is shrouded in a shadow underneath the ominous lighting. One can also contemplate that Kendrick has most likely chosen to keep the details of his future work in the metaphorical dark, and the simplicity of the Grand National model in comparison to the GNX could be an allusion to him returning to his regular style of artistic direction in regards to his future music. Since he has chosen to expound upon the impact and influence of the modern-day West Coast sound and aesthetic in hopes of shedding light on a wider variety of talent that has originated in the cities and districts of urban California, I firmly believe that he is trying to reassure his audience with the underlying message that if we remain patient, he will eventually deliver on his promise of committing to a full-fledged album that shows his primary range of abilities once more, whilst reminding listeners that the conscious sound that originally brought him into the rap game is not too far gone and in turn has not been removed from his palette of musical expression. Lastly, the title of this song is called GNX, and on this album of the same name, he has another track titled GNX, which is surprisingly not an extended version of this rendition, like most would presume. If you guys would like me to go over all the cryptic imagery that is placed throughout the remainder of this trailer, then let me know in the comments and I'll do a more extensive breakdown in the future. However, for now, let's pivot our attention to the meaning and implications behind the lyrics of this unlisted snippet and dive deep into the various aggressive and thought-provoking verses scattered amongst Lamar's controversial teaser for GNX. As soon as the track starts, we are met with the strings of an empty but also surprisingly euphoric beat as Kendrick enters the song like he is attempting to almost serenade the listener over deep swells of grand chords and an unorthodox drum pattern.
Only thing matter right now is living right now, and I can't spare no feelings.
In the first line of the introductory verse, he proclaims to his audience that the only thing that matters as a recent is living his life in abundance, even if that means accidentally provoking negative responses from the public or his inner circle of friends. He then follows up his overarching statement with him stating essentially that his aura or personality and artistic prowess in this reference is too imposing for the ones around him, hypothetically alluding to the fact that even in a quiet setting, he would be the loudest person in the room, simply based off the credentials and accolades he's amassed over the years.
But I navigate through hood shit and wisdom. The money out here, young man, for a quarter in your hand, you'll die broke trying to play victim. The little ideas I told made people go rogue until God did me a big one.
The next bar, we hear him remark on the struggle he endures when he tries to find a foothold between his contemporary life as a musician and artist and his past history of gang-related activity and influence, calmly stating that he navigates through hood shit and wisdom, referring to his temptation towards his violent and immoral past and how he hopes that his intelligence can be a saving grace and the main focus to his life. The following bar serves as a stern yet motivational mantra for the impoverished adolescent men that listen to Kendrick, aiming to inspire them to achieve new heights and exceed their financial limitation. Lamar urges the youth to stop simply relying on the assistance of other people and instead find empowerment in achieving what is deemed the impossible by pushing themselves to be great, whilst also delivering a brash warning that if you fail to realize your potential in life, the consequences of your decisions can be dire and might result in an unfavorable lifestyle, plagued with unnecessary struggle. The last bar in the intro to this track has Kendrick relaying the fact that at one point in his career, the creative ideas that he presented to other people before he reached the heights of his success were often shot down and in turn led people away from his life who didn't share the same premonitions as him. We can further infer from this line that Lamar believes that God has specifically blessed him with the gift of being able to share his musical productions and visionary creations with the world in hopes of not having his impact on society stifled by individuals that simply don't understand the artistic direction of his music. In the second verse, Lamar decides to abandon his previous cadence and harmonic vocal effect for a more monotone and sullen voice. He begins the stanza by stating that he is reincarnated with love and that his Gemini twin is back and powering up.
Reincarnated with love, my Gemini twin back powering up. No more handshakes and hugs. The energy only circulate through us. Everybody must be judged, but this time God only favoring us.
Lamar over the years has often referenced his astrological sign, the Gemini, as a leading force in the artistic process of his music, implying that he has a certain duality to his personality that often intermingles with his day-to-day life and actions, as he often bounces from one mindset to the other, or presumably from good to bad and vice versa. So in this retrospect, he is referring to the side of him that prefers aggression and violent tendencies, and believes that since he has been brought back to life in a sense through his new musical endeavors, his alter ego is also alive and in turn gaining as much energy as he is, which adds more emphasis to the next bar where Lamar raps that he has no more handshake or hugs for anyone who isn't a part of his personal community or influenced by the peaceful agenda he's trying to bring forth, stating that the energy only circulates through us, which can be seen as a quick callback to his Grammy-nominated song, Not Like Us. Lamar chooses to personify the word us in relation to the community of people he believes follow similar principles and practices as him, both morally and culturally. So by saying the energy only circulates through them, he's allowing the audience to infer that he will only encourage or motivate the efforts of others that follow the traditions and teachings that he also reveres. Choosing to abridge himself from specific parties or interests that don't align with his ultimate goal of peace and unity. The next bar can be seen once again in a more religious context as he references the biblical belief of monastic atonement, stating that everybody must be judged, but this time God only favoring us. Us once again being an allusion to the vast diaspora of ethnic people that are embedded in America and society as a whole. In recent projects, Kendrick has mentioned his belief in the Black Hebrew Israelite movement. Even though he does not confirm his allegiance publicly, he shares similar testaments on notable tracks and albums such as To Pimp a Butterfly and Damn. Lamar personally believes that all people of ethnic descent have indigenous African origins and are specifically related to the 12 tribes of Israel that are referred to in Genesis verse 29 through 30 in the Old Testament of the Bible. These destined biblical tribes were chosen by God to one day return to a land filled with metaphorical milk and honey, also referred to as the Promised Land. Lamar interprets this divine manifest destiny in a more modern point of view, assuring that God would choose to bless the people that follow the same lineage of his covenant disciples. He capitalizes on this testament in his next line, rapping that he is 20 years into his musical career and still has maintained a writing style dedicated to advocating for the truth he believes in, no matter how controversial.
But this time God only favoring us. 20 years in, still got that pen dedicated to bare hard truth. The headache can speak with a vigilant tongue. The predicate this time is fuck you.
In his next bar, we hear Kendrick recall the traumatic experiences of his cumbersome lifestyle and how the pain and grief that often aid the conflict in his head are allowing him to speak with a more poignant and clear tongue in terms of addressing his personal critics through a musical medium. However, the sentiment is still deeply rooted in his struggles, so the overall message is essentially fuck you. Many fans could take this chance to theorize that this could be a shot to Drake and their negative relationship, basically stating that Drake has given him a headache of sorts with their recent public feud, and essentially now his tolerance has come to a limit where he cannot help but revert to an angrier state of being. To almost double down on this lyrical entendre, Lamar begins his next bars on the brink of a dramatic sonic disposition in the beat, where the chord progressions begin to thin out and approach a more aggressive and modern trap style production with added bass and synth.
For the Olympians too, I'm carrying various darts right now. I deserve this bitch like tiramisu. See, we go body for body. I hand you a body, I'm probably a better masseuse.
He raps, "I'm carrying various darts right now," which can be seen as an abrasive lyric suggesting that Lamar is carrying the pain and weight of the criticism he might receive, but also can be in a double entendre to his possession of various types of weaponry or ammunition, as darts can be interpreted as something that can physically be aimed and shot with precision. "I desert this bitch like tiramisu" is an interesting line as well, stating how Lamar leaves a place empty similarly to a desert, and alludes that the brown and barren landscape can be compared to the layer of dusky sand like garnishing placed on top of a tiramisu dessert. This can also be further interpreted in a more violent nature, as Lamar suggests that these darts that he's carrying essentially can empty a room or area of its inhabitants, presumably killing or eliminating any opposition in his path. If you were to use a more urban vernacular, one would say he's giving a warning in advance before he ears this bitch out.
See, we go body for body. I hand you a body, I'm probably a better masseuse. I really don't bother nobody, but they run it by me if I gotta clear out the rest.
In the last seconds of this teaser trailer, Lamar deliberately chooses to unveil the hidden angst of his Gemini twin that has been powering up the whole verse. By switching his cadence into a harsher and more aggressive tone and delivery, he warns the listener that he can go body for body with anyone. But in this case, we presume he is talking about the Toronto-born rapper Drake. Catching a body is an urban slang reference that simply suggests the homicidal notion of killing or harming an individual, So by stating that he is going body for body, he believes that if Drake harms or kills a person that is in the camp of his associations, he will return the favor and do the same. Rapping further in the track that if he hands you a body, he's presumably the better masseuse, which is a clever play on words, as he basically means that he will handle the violent responsibilities of killing someone with more proficiency and ease in relations to his opposition, Drake. In the last line of the bar, he states that I really don't bother nobody, but they run it by me if I gotta clear out the and abruptly cuts himself short just to yell the echoing word Christ, as he presumably has reached the extent of his patience. Lamar has admitted to remaining cordial and neutral in most fronts of his public image, so for anyone to purposely cultivate any unnecessary hatred for him is often a shock to his audience and himself. Given this rare occasion with the public outlash between him and Drake, Kendrick believes that since he is tempered, he might as well hypothetically air out the room. Him yelling to Christ in the last sequence of the track can also be a metaphor that his Gemini twin that often represents the good and religious aspects of his life is intermixing with the more violent natured and aggressive side of him, ultimately forcing him to call to the patron prophet for help, since he finds himself at the heels of vengeance and in the midst of threatening not just Drake, but anyone who goes against his inner purpose and public sense of community. Approximately 30 minutes after the trailer dropped for this unpromoted feature-length album, the full array of songs, which consisted 12 tracks and multiple featuring artists, was published on YouTube and various streaming platforms to the surprise of every anxious fan and critic alike. In my upcoming videos, I will be covering the rest of the disses and references scattered amongst songs such as Reincarnation, Peekaboo, and Whacked Out Murals, which actually serves as a nod to a disturbing event where Lamar's famed mural, which is often revered as a cultural and historical landmark in Compton, California, was essentially destroyed when a group of unknown aggressors chose to graffiti specific gang-related slurs on top of his personified likeness. So, stay tuned for more to come and continue to show your support by liking and subscribing to this channel if that's possible. I'm so deeply appreciative of the success of my last video. As an avid writer and artist, I sometimes struggle with finding my muse of inspiration for specific productions. However, you guys showing how much you admired my efforts in my previous attempt is immensely encouraging, and I can't wait to make more for you guys for years to come. I sort of rushed to put this out to show my love for this community that I pray can be based on open thought and free-minded interpretations of the art form that we all love dearly. Thank you once again for helping me reach the milestone of 1,000 subscribers. It means the world. I hope that you and others around you have a blessed day. Thank you so much.